Welcome to the U3 Media Podcast, where our mission is to unite the world through coffee. I'm Christy Ross, and joining us today is Andy and Nanelle Newbom, co-founders of Torque Coffees. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. A lot to talk about. You both have a long, rich history in coffee. You co-founded the Barista Guild of America, Barefoot Coffee Roasters, and an import company. Right. And then Andy, I think you're also an author, and you guys do so much more. So you're a husband and wife team, and you have been in coffee 23 years. Yep. Is that about right?
Yeah. I guess that means we're officially old.
That's okay. I talk in decades, okay?
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
All right. So you guys have been on multiple sides of the industries. So give us some color sort of on the different areas that you spent time in over the years in coffee.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start. So, I think one of the things that's interesting about kind of what we have done is, one, we're very interested in coffee. So then we tend to want to explore all the kind of aspects and assets and pieces and parts, and every part of it is fascinating. So, we feel like we've kind of had our hand in at least some portion of almost every single part. I guess not coffee farming itself, but we definitely I started as kind of a chef for a bunch of years, but as a busboy technically, and then into a chef. But we have done everything from barista to roaster to export, import. Both on the retail side, wholesale side. I mean, so kind of a lot of different pieces and parts that I feel like, most people who stick around in coffee for a long time, or coffee lifers as we call them, tend to move around a little bit and explore different areas. I know certainly for me, I've always had this weird sort of dichotomy of this focus on service and hospitality, and service focused on the producer side, which aren't necessarily the same halves of a coin.
No, you're right.
So I find I like both of those, and so I continuously kind of gravitate towards things that kind of combine those two.
So what was your favorite area of coffee over the years? And secondly, what area was there an aha moment for you in coffee?
Okay, well, I'll start with my aha moment, because it kind of bleeds into what my favorite parts of coffee are. So my aha moment was back in 1987. I was in Cleveland dancing with the Cleveland Ballet. And there was this coffee shop called Arabica there. And it was near the laundromat that I used. Anyway, I loved the vibe, and at first I just loved the vibe and the carrot cake. But I did gradually start developing an interest in the coffees, because even back then, when coffee was a little bit less differentiated in how it was presented, just the fact that coffees tasted differently from each other was something that was new and interesting to me. And I can just remember looking at a map and wondering, where is Sumatra? And it just made me curious. And I got more and more curious about the coffees themselves, the differences between them, and the people that did the work behind it. And my whole coffee journey, I think, has just been driven by this curiosity about, why is this different from that? And who did this? And where even is that? Oh, and they're growing coffee in China now? Wait, I just have so many questions, right. And I still have so many questions. And that's why we end up doing so many different things.
I think, too, as an entrepreneur, that is one of those traits of just natural curiosity that helps you, dive in and build a great business. So was your moment different, Andy?
So I think that, so like I said, she started in, kind of liking coffee in 1987, where since most coffee absolutely sucks, obviously hated coffee. I remember as a teenager driving my Vespa to the Italian gelato espresso bar with my friends, And I remember saying, I wish I was cool enough to like espresso. but it's too disgusting, so there's no point. So in the Bay Area, I was working in tech, and Nanelle was a police officer. And she didn't think she was going to get off training. She'd always wanted to have a coffee bar, but she didn't think she was going to get off training. So she's like, all right, I think we're going to do it. And I was like, okay, well, coffee's disgusting, so obviously I'm not going to do anything with the coffee. But I guess let's do a coffee and wine bar. And this is like in, I don't know, 2000. So we ended up going to the fancy food show in San Francisco. And she's like, all right, let's just try a bunch of coffee roasters. I was like, no, let's not.
I'm like, no, come on.
And then so we did.
Taste
So
it.
because I'm a glutton for punishment, I ended up drinking or tasting 11 espressos
Oh my God.
at the show. I didn't drink all of them. I threw most of them away, but I still sipped 11 espressos from 11 different roasters at the show. And then I was like, all right, they're all equally disgusting. Who cares? I'm done. I said, now I'm going to the wine pavilion to sample wines, right? So, and to wash this taste out of my mouth. And she's like, okay, fine. And we're walking along. And we pass this one booth. She's like, wait, I'm going to stop here. I was like, well, I'm not. So, and the guy goes, wait, you want an espresso? I was like, no, I don't. And he said, yes, you do. And I was like, no, I don't. He's all, yes, you do. And I was like, well, okay, fine. And so he hands me this little tiny paper cup, same size as the rest, same everything. I'm walking away. I'm about 15 feet away. I'm absent-mindedly running through my list of wineries I'm going to talk to. I take a sip, and I shouted at the top of my lungs out loud, oh my God, I have to be the one that makes this. And I was just like, and I turned around and I shouted like the 20 feet away. I was like, what is this? He's all, it's espresso. I was like, bullshit. I've had 11 today, and they were disgusting, and this one's amazing. And I was like, who are you, and what's going on, and what's this? And I just, from that moment on, I was done. Like, I was in 100%.
Yeah, he wanted to know how to make it taste good.
Yeah.
That was his thing.
My curiosity is
Right.
piqued here. So what in the world were they doing differently? What was it?
Fundamentally, this is what I learned. From that, I started part-time at a coffee bar, still doing high tech, but I was like trying to do that. And I heard about this barista competition that I didn't know what a barista was at the time, really. But and they certainly didn't know what competitions were. It was the very first Western Regional. It was the first barista competition ever in Portland. So I was like, oh, I'll go. But turns out there's rules, which they didn't publish.
Turns out there's technique.
And there's technique, which they didn't tell you about. And you had to bring supplies and equipment, which I did not bring. Although most people also didn't bring things. But so I got there. I'm using Panache, which is Coffee Bean International, which is now Farmers Brothers. Like, it was like, but they were just better coffee than the other people I had, basically. And I'm there, and I'm frustrated because I cannot get anything to come out of this grinder or this espresso machine at all. And I'd actually failed on stage. It took me my performance is where they invented the time limit for the barista competitions, because I went for 40 minutes and I didn't really make anything because it wouldn't work, right? So, but I'm backstage, like I'm burning through all the rest of my coffee, trying to figure out why I can't make this espresso taste good when it usually tastes kind of okay. And as I actually said, you know what? Coffee's impossible. You can't do it. I give up. And this young woman walked behind me, and she's like, well, what's the problem? I was like, coffee's stupid and it sucks, and there's no point. And she's like, here, let me try it. So she walks up. She didn't do anything that I could see. No adjustments, no machine changes. She just, and then I was like, wait, how'd you do that? She's like, well, and she kind of explained it to me. And as she's moving her hands, I realized that it was the hands that craft the drink that made the difference.
Was that Bronwyn?
That was Bronwyn Serna. So Bronwyn, you're awesome. She knows this story. So, and I basically was like, oh, so it reinforced that it's really hard to make it good, that it takes technique, but it also takes people, right?
Yeah.
And so once I had that connection,
It takes training.
yeah,
So that means it takes people who care a lot.
yeah, and skill.
And I think that's really
Yeah.
the difference.
Yeah,
So there,
no,
that's my
that
long
totally
story.
makes sense. But that's a good aha moment. And boy, oh boy, when you fail, you learn so much, right?
Yes.
And nothing like failing on stage, right?
Yes.
Oh my God. So let's talk about Torque. So it's a fairly new project for you guys, and I
Yep.
call it a project, but I mean it is literally a incredible endeavor, because the
Yeah.
more the further I dove into it, you guys are doing some pretty incredible things. So before we get there, like, what actually led you to start Torque? Because you've been here and done this before.
Yeah.
So why again?
And we still haven't learned. So apparently, I don't know. We're not very smart. So we keep doing it.
There comes a time when there's a lot of challenges in owning your own business, especially in coffee.
Yeah, especially.
But there also are there's just different challenges in being an employee. And like there's some things that are easier, but I think that fundamentally we're more driven by doing things that light our fire, that are interesting, than we are by security in the long run.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get that, though. I totally get that.
The genesis for Torque was, wasn't. I mean, it was an aha moment to realize a key thing, but was basically a partial solution to a problem that's been vexed everybody in the industry.
That's right.
But basically, I mean, the reason for Torque is actually just because we are always trying to figure out how to get more. I used to say more money into the hands of the coffee producers, but now we kind of realize it's more about getting more equity, more of the balance, and more of the
and more across the board.
Yeah, more kind of across the board, but also making the whole system work, right? Because everybody has to make money. I mean, so it can't be just dump everything on one end like we do now on the consumer side. So I was sitting on the couch one day, and I've been thinking a lot about how do you kind of solve coffee problems and producer problems and different things, and I was really, really thinking about the value in coffee and where value is assigned. And we're literally I was sitting on the couch, and I think we were watching TV. I don't remember, and I suddenly said, "Hey." So, and I wrote these notes on my phone while I was talking. And it's like 4 or 5 lines, and it was everything all at once. I said, "What if we use scores to value the quality, right? To convey value and quality, right? And 0 to 100. Well, why is carbon score like a negative? Like, who wants to race to 0? Like, that's a dumb kind of idea. And plus, you can't, because the farmers are positive and we're negative no matter what we do, right? So I was like, well, then we should basically just score the producers on a 0 to 100 thing on the carbon side. That'd be cool. I was like, well, then if you did value of the economic side, it would be the same thing, 0 to 100, right? Well, 100% is the total sale price, and 0 is what they typically get. So I just came up with this
pretty close to 0.
Yeah, so I came up with this idea of basically assigning a number to the economic value, and we'd actually started the basic idea at Barefoot in 2008, which is where transparent trade came from. We talked to Peter Roberts at the time, and you talked to him in Columbia, and pitched him on this idea that we'd wanted to do, but we couldn't figure out how to do, which was sort of like show the percentage of the price that went to the producer. But we didn't have I couldn't figure out a mechanism to make it work. And then I sit on the couch and all of a sudden realized, wait, what if instead of trying to figure out what you did pay, you just made a percentage that was automatic, and it worked on both directions. So instead of going like, well, how much do I pay them, or how much do I sell this for, or what did they get, or calculate it, we just said, what if it was just a easy 20%? Americans are not very good at math, so I was like, 20% is easy, right? 20% of the purchase price that the consumer got and paid, which is the only one they really know. If that went to the producer, and the same thing is what the producer knows is that what the price that they got paid, that's 20% of the retail price and 35% of the wholesale price in our model. Right. So to make that be consistent and transparent and both sides knew it, was this like, wow, how impactful would that be if you didn't have to really read a long report and study this 40-page document about how we were totally going to do a bunch of stuff, but then we didn't.
What if they were literally just tied together?
Just intrinsically tied together.
Yeah. Well, you basically like reverse engineered the payment process, right?
And I think
Yeah.
that was actually the most interesting part was that end consumer side, right? I mean, we are not our typical customer. I mean, we don't wear branded stuff and we don't buy things, and we're weird. So, but the consumer who's actually buying the coffee, I think we had this weird expectation that they would like care a lot about the same things that we care a lot about. And I've tried that for sure. And it doesn't really work because they're like, well, but you've trained me to care about the flavor and the pretty package and the attributes and stuff. So I want to make it where it's just 20%. Like that's all you have to care about. And then people say, well, is that more? It's like, well, you should ask other roasters what they pay.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, they won't tell me. Like, interesting. Yeah. So maybe it's probably pretty high then, huh? So
Transparency and education are really important, right? I mean, and you just don't see enough of that.
yeah. So that's kind of our basic focus, is try to make it where that is a relatively simple, transactional transparency.
Okay, well, so I have two other questions off of that. Because I saw that you don't use farm gate pricing. So sort of unpack that for me a little bit and help us educate the end consumer of why you don't use that.
Yeah, I mean, and farm gate is a very difficult to define number or concept. It seems really easy if you think about one country and you have a single farm owner. That's really easy, right? And that is definitely our background. Like we buy from single farms a lot. We've known these farmers for decades, so it's really easy to talk to them and get the exact farm gate price. But we also love cooperatives, and we love like village community lots, right? And there isn't really a farm gate equivalent of that. That doesn't really work the same way. And then every country has a really wide range on how you can get the coffee and where it comes from and where it starts and where it lands. And like different parts of the country, it costs more to get it from point A to the port than others. So we realized that if we only wanted to buy from single owner farms, relatively well off people in very specific countries that have certain kind of operating parameters of as far as export, then we could use farm gate.
Got it.
If you want to do anything else, a farm gate is like almost impossible to define. So we came up with this producer price, and we basically said, well, the consumer's buying a roasted coffee in a bag, pre-portioned, ready to go. Like they're not like this idea of coffee; they're getting an actual package that they can then consume, right? So then we said, well, the equivalent of that in green coffee is this, ready to export. It's been dry milled, it's been wet milled, it's in a Grain Pro bag, it's in an export bag. It's still at the mill, so it hasn't left to go to port. But that point is an equivalent, no matter what country you're in, no matter what co-op, whatever. That is a definable point in the transaction.
Totally.
That took us some time. That was not at first we were like farm gate or like some other thing, and it was like, okay, what about Ethiopia? What about cooperatives? Like it just became, so we've figured that out over the last year.
No, I think that's really important. I think a lot of people don't understand that. And even in the coffee industry, it's good to sort of surface that conversation around farm gate and defining that. So how many places of origin have you guys been to, and how many different origin coffees do you offer?
Not enough. I mean, so I've never been to any of the producing countries in Africa, any of the islands, or any of the Asian producing countries. I've just been up and down the Americas. I think, Peru, Colombia. We lived in El Salvador for a couple of years.
Through
Central America and
Guatemala,
Mexico.
Honduras.
But I've never had the opportunity to go to any of the Asian producing countries someday.
So wait, so you lived in Ecuador for 2 years? Like, what was one of the biggest things you learned from living there?
Oh my goodness, I don't even know what the biggest things I learned while living there.
El Salvador.
I learned a lot about myself as a person. The cultural adaptation was vastly more challenging than the linguistic transition. But oh my goodness, I mean, I can't even begin. I don't even know.
So how do you pick your producing partners and get to, like, call it just sustainable partnerships? And how does that production, year over year, inform the qualitative selection, as well as the pricing?
Well, the of the partners that we're working with right now, we're really lucky in that we have these existing relationships that were really, really solid. And you mentioned the year over year element. And for us, that's super important to really have a working relationship with your producing partners rather than making each year a whole new decision process.
Right.
That doesn't feel good. And I also don't think it's functional because consistency is really important. Not that the coffee should always taste the same, but that it should always be consistently really great and a good representation of that year. So relationship really is huge. We do have some coffees from people that we haven't met. And in those instances, it's really about them having a really great project that they're doing that produces an amazing product and that has awesome people behind it.
Yeah. Right.
Definitely people is always going to be the focus. Like when, what we always say is, we're not really looking for coffees. Like we're not hunting for cool, rare coffees. We're basically hunting for amazing coffee people who want to make amazing coffee. Well,
great products come from great people.
Yeah. Kind of like. So that tends to be where we want to kind of like push and find areas. A logistical, operational, technical portion is, everybody buys from importers and exporters. Anybody who says they don't is not clear. So importers and exporters are awesome because like it's a logistical craziness to try to get coffee from point A to point B. Sure. It's not like ship it. It takes a little more effort than that, right? So we love importers and exporters. The issue, of course, is that most importers and exporters, and by design, but also by necessity, aren't really interested in like opening their books and showing you every detail because they think most people would nitpick and say, well, you're making too much money. And we're like, we don't really care how much money you make per se, as long as it's in this kind of like range. But we absolutely have to know the producer price and all of the costs to get there on both sides so that we can verify, because we know the industry really well and we know how it works. I've done import and export both. So we know, oh, so you're saying it's $1 to do this? Yeah, that's not true. So, so we can kind of like find the real numbers. And then if they can give us those, then we can work with them. If they can't, we can't. It's a hard thing because sometimes we're like, oh, wow, this coffee's great or your story's great. And then you can't give us the information.
Well, we have to know what is this that definable stage.
Yeah.
What's the money at that point?
Well, I think one of the things that you guys have done really special in comparison to the rest of the industry, everybody says they want to make sure that the farmer is getting paid a fair wage, or they're using that as marketing, right? Or whatever. But you guys have gone above and beyond to say, I have broken this down to dollars and cents, and you guys are making sure that you're getting the right answer. So I think that is outstanding and definitely a differentiator. And I wish that you guys would take that to the industry level and make that happen. So why aren't you like president of all the associations and everything?
Wow.
and actually, at SCA last year, when we kind of announced that we were starting things, I talked to dozens and dozens of roasters. I know tons, and I've done a lot of conference calls with different roasters and talked about the model, and we have a lot of people who are very interested in it. So I guess our mission is, as we say, fundamentally is to break the coffee industry supply chain. Like we want to break it, make it not function anymore, and then remake it in equilibrium. So that's not that's not that's not even a place for, like, say if you're the president of SCA, you still couldn't do that. I mean, it requires like much more of a sea change and a momentum, right? So what we realized is, and this is actually came from talking to one of our producers. He's like, well, he said this is the most interesting idea that has the potential to fundamentally change the lives of coffee producers of anything I've ever seen. He said, however, you still have to prove that it works because it's really radical and weird. We think it's really simple. I don't think it's radical and weird. I think it's incredibly simple. And I think the reason we don't have other roasters doing it is because it's too simple.
Well, so I'm a numbers person, and the numbers work. I mean, from what you're presenting, the numbers work. And I think it's again, I believe in transparency, and I think that you guys, I don't see why everybody doesn't just do it. And I hear that it's too simple, but right?
Yeah, I think many more roasters are going to come out with doing it. And, I think what I always encourage other roasters when I talk to them, I said, well, look at your numbers, like run your numbers now. And I said, I bet you, like one person said, I could never do that because I have 26 coffees. And I said, no, you don't. It's like, yes, I do. I have 26 coffees. Like, I guarantee you don't have 26 coffees. He said, oh, I do. I said, stop. I'm going to stop right there. You probably have 3 coffees. It's like, what do you mean? I said, well, do you have 26 price points at retail? No. You probably have 3 or 4, right? Yeah. You have 3 coffees. Yep. In our model, you have 3 coffees. And you just have to basically, maybe you have different percentages, at different levels, but I think is strange. But, just pick a number that works for you. Maybe it's 14%. Maybe it's 6%. Whatever it is. Maybe you're someone like Equal Exchange who's probably closer to 30%, right? Yeah. So I think you pick a number and then you say, this is where we sit, and you'll find that you're probably pretty close already. Yeah. If you're a really good roaster buying good coffee and, being fairly equitable. So I think, but then the problem is, here's the big problem in the model. Our margins are fixed. And that sucks.
No, it's great.
Well, but I mean, as a business, it's tough to have fixed margins because the producer price sets our retail price. The producer price sets our wholesale price. So
you can't charge extra for...
Yeah, if we're like, I want to make a super cool, sexy package that costs $5 instead of $1, I'll charge more. Nope, you can't charge more.
But you're solving a really important problem, right? And that's the trade-off, right?
Right. Yep, that's the trade-off.
And it's worth it to have the argument. I think that his whole reason for the idea is to create a foundation to argue with people with. Right. Yeah. Because that's the fun part for him. And it's not and I actually agree with what he said, that a lot of roasters are not that far off on what they're paying the farmer. Maybe a little bit they could come up. But it wouldn't be something that's prohibitive for most roasters. But I think that the challenge for many people internally is the idea of thinking in terms of proportionality. It's very much it sets off alarm bells in an American's brain because we are capitalists.
Commies.
And we're thinking in terms of everybody getting their set portion. Yeah. And that kind of goes off of it. That can be opposed by our internal entrepreneur. Where we're like, no, I want to make high profits.
Right.
And it's really hard to detach yourself from wanting to make super high profits and to think in terms of, I want to make proportionally even profits. Yeah. And I want to make a bunch of money, but I want it to be that's just a hard way of thinking for our American brains.
It absolutely is. It's a different mindset though, right? I mean, and I feel like, to be honest, I feel like this next generation has a social impact mindset a little different than sort of, the capitalists that we are, right, over the many decades. But anyway, so I feel like there's hope. And when you create a structure for education and for transparency, like you guys have, it actually at least sets the stage to help build on, right? I mean, I think that's good. Okay, so we only have a little bit of time left, and I have so many questions. So I'm gonna try to get through a few more of these.
All right.
Between the two of you working together, like how are you dividing and conquering? Because I love the interplay we have here with you two, but super curious how you divide and conquer.
He is the front man of this band. I'm more of the bass player. I like the background stuff, forming structures, production, team building, and he does all of the front stage. He's on the stage. Sales, marketing, messaging, evangelism, brand evangelism. That's
Yeah.
him.
So
Yeah.
I got to point this out for a second because Andy, you got to give a little bit of color on your titles on LinkedIn. You have
Yeah.
marketing wonk, which I don't think I've seen anywhere.
Right.
Coffee geek, people nerd, and wannabe guitar god. I need some color.
Tell us about that.
Well, so speaking of I'll start at the end there. So speaking of like sort of musicians, band, kind of rock star stuff. So, Nanelle, my superpower wife, has always been a fan of practicing. When she was a ballerina, everything she's done has been basically training for the Olympics.
Train, you practice, and you do it right.
Right. And so I don't tend to want to practice as much. Like the famous line is like, no, I don't want to learn to speak French. I want to speak French. Right. So, so I always would say like, man, I want to be like a rock star. She's like, oh, we should learn to play an instrument. I was like, no, I don't want to be a musician. I want to be a rock star. I was like, I don't have the patience to like learn an instrument, and then like not ever play because I'm always like getting ready to play, right? So so I think
Hence the wannabe.
Well, but you two are literally like a match made in heaven because you really complement each other like very, very well with your skill sets. And Nanelle, and you have labeled yourself as the coffee lady, which that was your title, I think. I saw somewhere. But
Yeah.
so what? Well, and I also have to just double check with my husband and make sure that he uses superpower wife as my title as you did with her.
right.
And so how would you describe each other in 3 words?
Expressive, intuitive, and hyperactive.
There you go. So for me, 3 words would be disciplined, visionary, and intense.
Nice. I love that combo. Amazing. So with everything you guys have brought together and created together, what creation are you most proud of and why? Because you've done a lot together over these last couple decades.
Well, I'm not necessarily super proud of anything that I feel that I created, per se. I am most proud of the people that I've had the opportunity to like work with and seeing where after working with them, what they've gone off to do and who they are. And that's always been like, when I think of what I'm proud of, I'm like, I'm proud that I got to work with her. I'm proud that I got to work with him. Because I feel like the team really is like, sort of like he was saying, he has always felt that great people make great products. And that's kind of always, that was like a big deal at Barefoot. Like it was just like a really great team that came together. And it dispersed into a bunch of other really, really great teams that manifest themselves out in the world. And that's what I'm most proud of.
Yeah, and actually I would be pretty similar. I mean, if I think in terms of the effect that we had the kind of the most joy, that I get the most joy out of, is that same thing. Like a very specific example is, Barefoot Coffee, which we had for almost 9 years. The almost all, I mean, like 85% of all the people that worked there are still in coffee in some way.
Most
right?
as entrepreneurs.
And most of them have become entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
We even have like one of our employees who became a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
She still works at the coffee bar one day every month or two because she just can't, like, she just loves it. And so it's a really interesting feeling to like we feel like people say, oh, you guys are really good at like building a team. It's like, no, I think what we're good at is finding and or attracting, whichever way that kind of works, diamonds in the rough, and then giving people resources and freedom and runway, and saying, you know, like with this famous line, if it's not amazing, then we did something wrong. So make it amazing. And people were like, well, what do you mean? Like, was it amazing? No, then don't serve it. Like, what do you like? Make it amazing. And that, just that simpleness, I think, really attracts certain kinds of people. Obviously, it drives away other kinds of people. But so I feel like we had so many interesting, amazing humans that just kept going on to do new, cool things, right? So
I love that both of your answers were around people and connections and yeah. So I think that's pretty awesome, and it really sort of encapsulates the type of people that you are, which is great. You're focusing on all the right things. So I know that we only have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we hit some of these last questions. And these are going to be rapid fire questions, okay? And so what I would say is just we'll go to Nanelle first, and then we'll go to you, Andy, and we'll just run through these really quickly, okay? So can you share a general coffee industry stat that you find interesting or fascinating?
Probably not. Okay, I
Throw
can.
it over to Andy.
No. Okay, so I saw this coffee infographic about the proportion of a retail drink price that goes to for the coffee, and it was like less than 10%. I can't remember the stat though. It was like just 2%. Incredibly low of the amount in a coffee drink that goes to the coffee, and in the price, and that sticks in my brain.
Got it.
My interesting stat is not really a stat, but it's an observation that fundamentally changed my entire outlook on coffee on my first trip to Guatemala. Edwin Martinez from Finca Vista Mosa, we were discussing this pile of coffee that I was like, well, that doesn't look very good. So, and he's like, well, but every coffee has a home. And I was like, huh. And he said, but not every coffee do I want in my home. He's all, but every coffee has a home. And then he just went on to explain where all the parts of the things went, and where all the coffee and different prices and different things. And that phrase, every coffee has a home, really changed my kind of outlook on, you know, it's like, of course I want some super crazy rare whatever coffee maybe, but like every coffee has a home, and you can find a place, you know, for kind of most things that a producer, you know, can kind of put out there. So I think that's you know, there is bad coffee, quote, but like it still has a home. So
it still has a home, but that's very thought-provoking. I like that phrase.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump into the U3 top 3, and so these are very brief answers. So your favorite brewing method?
Filter drip.
I like Chemex and then espresso.
For consumption, your coffee drink of choice, like black, latte, hot, cold, specific wash or origin?
I actually just, I'm very simple. Filter drip, really, really good filter drip. And I like coffee with milk. So just a little bit of whole milk in it.
I do not like coffee in milk, not filter coffees. I like just straight black coffee. I tend to prefer Chemex-y type filter coffees. And then on espresso side, a macchiato is my favorite drink. So I like espresso with milk, but not drip coffee. So
perfect. And how many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
3.
Yeah.
Probably.
On a typical day, 3 to 5 for me maybe. But, you know, if we're cupping or doing a blend, it might be, you know, the equivalent of 25. So,
yeah, for sure. Is there anything else you want to share about Torque that we didn't cover?
No.
I have one. So one of the reasons, I'm a coffee or a word guy. I'm a word kind of nerd too. So the reason for the name Torque is basically when I was thinking about equilibrium, and we were thinking about the way things are balanced and equity and all these kind of give and takes, but also talking about force and impact. I read this definition in a physics textbook about basically the definition of equilibrium. And equilibrium is the balance, the amount of force, the amount of torque it takes to achieve balance or equilibrium around a fixed axis. So dynamic equilibrium means it's continuously turning, but torque is the amount of force needed to achieve equilibrium around a fixed axis. And the coffee industry has a fixed axis because you have the consumers and you have the producers, and everything goes along sort of a chain. So you can't like decouple all that, but you can make it a circle, and you can bring torque. So I wanted to have consumers, they have torque and how they purchase, and then producers have torque basically in how they produce, and make those two things connect and be equal. So that was like where the name torque came from.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. All right, and I want to give you an opportunity to share where someone can learn more about you or learn more about torque.
So torquecoffees.com is our website. Also, Torque Coffees is on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, etc. And basically, you can read everything there. In fact, you can also download our entire green coffee purchasing partner program, which is like about 4 pages. It's designed for coffee producers and importers, exporters, but you can download that. I think I sent it to you, Christy. And everything we do is very transparent because we want that model to kind of keep getting out there. So download it, check it. You can see every transactional detail about every coffee because we think it's important to show it. So, but yeah.
It's definitely worth checking out for sure. And thank you so much for joining us, both of you. What a wonderful, rich journey. Appreciate you sharing it with us.
Thank you, Christine.
And of course, thank you for helping us unite the world through coffee. And thank you to our followers for joining us at U3 Coffee. We'll see you next time.